Greetings and welcome to this new episode of Let's Create Something with Trapcode Tao. And today will be dedicated on a subject that I've been skipping all up to now. So that's the repeat offset. So let's see how we can make nice patterns by repeating objects and offsetting their animations to make cool patterns that are mesmerizing or hypnotic. And I'd like to take the opportunity to give a big shout out to one of my inspirations, and it's this guy here, Bees and Bumps. His name is Dave White, and I've stumbled upon his stuff. I don't remember what got me there, but what he makes is amazing and I love it. So a couple of times I will look at his work and not rip off, but just take a nice concept and try to practice my Trapcode Tao skills by recreating it. And since all he does make perfect sense in terms of animation, and I try to make it more 3D and see what can I bring more to what he has, so we can have some kind of an artistic discussion. I'm not ripping him off. I'm not just redoing the exact same thing he does. He's kind of opening a path for all of us to experiment on, and I like this, so I'm trying to recreate the key concept of that and discover all the intricacies while doing it and having great fun. So let's start and let's open up After Effects, and we're gonna look at how we are going to do that. So let's go and create a new solid. Control N, and we're gonna make this one 1080 by 1080 because I like to have a square composition. And then let's create a new. Now that what we created was not a solid, and it was, it was a composition, but sometimes I get distracted and I miss some words, so sorry for that. So let's create our solid on which we'll apply Tau on. Let's do that, and let's fetch our effect here, Tau. We're gonna apply this to that, and we'll have this by default. So we're gonna use this as a basic ring, and if we ever need to do something more to it, then we'll recreate this with a light, but for the moment we'll just keep it as is with the path generator. So I'm gonna shut you off now, and so let's create a new light for our orbiting sphere. We're gonna create it by hitting Control Alt Shift L. I'm gonna make sure it's a spotlight. We're gonna call it Tau. And we could, of course, make one that is a Tau sphere and have it rotate, but that will prevent us from being able to mess around with the offset after we've set it up. So let's do it with segments. So this, we're gonna hit Control Alt O, and we're gonna set the auto orientation to off. And also we can quickly twice tap on A, and we're gonna make it all white to start off with. And let's create a little simple architecture here. I'm gonna create 3 nulls. Control Shift Alt N, Control Shift Alt Y. Create a new null. I'm gonna make them 3D. I'm gonna connect the light to this to that, and this one to that. I'm gonna center out my light, so I'm gonna set it all back to 0. I'm gonna try to push this right where the right where our circle is. So let's get to Google, and we're gonna go fetch the expression that we use very often, and it's the one to create a circle. So here is where I got the habit of grabbing it. So let's select this patch of code here, and we're gonna copy that, and we're gonna paste that onto the second null in our hierarchy here. So let's alt click on the position and let's paste that. So by default, let's just shut off our path generator for the moment, and by default this is there. So radius. All right. Let's set that to 0, so it's in fact at the center. And the angle time, now we want to have one full rotation. So if we look at this, the construction of geometry is 300 frames. So this is where it will end. We'll just make a marker here. So what happens here? It makes 1 revolution, 2 revolution, 3 revolution, 4, and it goes around quite a couple of times until it gets up to frame 300. What I do want is I want it to be at this exact same value on the frame 300, and I wanted to make exactly 1 rotation, not a couple. So this is this will be done through changing here the value that is multiplied by time here for the angle. So let's start by 36, and we'll have a minor gap here, but that's not a real issue for us since we'll be repeating segments. So right now it goes around once, and it ends at frame 300, and it ends on a it ends on an exact on exact numbers here with our values. So depending on how much time you're using to create geometry, this is what we'll use here as a value. So it's 360 degrees divided by 10. Anyway, and so that's our circle. Now we're gonna open up the path generator. So we have 2 generated paths. Let's change the aspect of that visually. So let's make it 8 sides. It's gonna be more cylindrical. Let's shut off the chamfer, and let's increase the amount of segments maybe. Let's get down to the rendering, and let's set that to smooth, and let's uncheck the break sides. So now we have kind of donuts or inflatable tubes. Now our generated path, we want it to be a ring, but we want to repeat spheres for the middle one, but we want this one to keep it as extruded n-gons. So this slide here, we're going to hard code the command here to make it display spheres. So to do that, we're going to type down mod colon s. That means sphere. So we're going to force refresh that, Control Alt front slash, and now as you can see, we have some nice, well, it's not that obvious that they are spheres for the moment, but let's add less. So right here in our segment amount, as you can see here, if I reduce this to have only 10, we'll have our circle, our spheres revolving around to create our ring here of spheres, and that's made with this slide here. So what if we do want a lot of segments, because we need the generated path here to be quite filled, and we don't want the edges to be like polygonal, like straight angles. So we want to reduce the amount of segments in there, and basically we just want 1 segment. We just need 1 sphere. So we're gonna type down seg colon 1, and what that's gonna make for us is gonna transform that into 1. It's gonna apply only 1 segment to our whole path. So if we offset that, we're gonna offset this very segment. Let's do one more thing before we go further than that. So we're gonna go down to the light settings, and we're gonna check in the size from radius, and that will allow us to just gonna try to keep it at 100 here globally, and we're gonna change the size here. So we reduce the size of our ring here, and our sphere here. Let's quickly twice tap on A, and we're gonna increase it with the radius here, and we want to center it on our ring right now. It's kind of not really aligned right now, and I'm gonna color that purple for the moment, and I might not use it all these, but the reason I'm doing it is if I if this one is the one that makes the path, like if we mess around with the position on this we have this intermediate null here, which we can use to unproportionally scale our sphere if we would ever need to do so. So that's and we have this one on top, which is straight at the center, and we can move our whole thing from this. But let's get back to our code here, and this is our radius. So we can go here and call it settings, the main null on top here, and we're gonna add a effect, expression controls. That's a custom property, and that's a custom value we're gonna be able to access here. And let's hit U to reveal the code here, and just get back on here. We're gonna lock it down so it stays in place, and we're gonna set that to 300 because that's the radius. We're gonna just pick up the number here, and we're gonna use the pick whip, and we're gonna simply grab this. So that will allow us to control the radius of our revolving sphere. It's not revolving yet, but we're gonna do that. So let me show you. If we had a tau sphere, let me just make one to show you. So I'm gonna make this one obvious to see. So right there, we're gonna just turn this off. We're gonna make it approximately the same size as the other one. And if we would like, we could do this. There's nothing wrong with doing this. I'm gonna make a null here, and it's at the center, so I'm gonna attach my sphere to it, and then I can simply rotate that to have my sphere around, rotating this thing. But we won't be able to offset it once we repeat the object. It's not gonna, it's not, this is not a path, this is just moving the sphere. So what we want is actually a constructed path with segments. And you gotta fix that motor, dude. Now let's uncheck the lock here so we can access our tau settings, and we want to go to the offset, and we're gonna make our simple offset motion. So we don't want to offset the size, we want to offset the position, and we're gonna set a keyframe at the beginning, and we're gonna go to frame 90, and we're gonna set that to 100. And what's that going to do is have our circle go around its path until it makes a complete revolution. So that's one way to have it rotate around our ring here. And if you can notice, our ring is also revolving as well, because it's made from this, and since we are activating the offset and we're offsetting its position, well, there's no way of shutting it off here with the tau circle, because we can't add any hard-coded commands to this. It's kind of integrated in the effect. So we're gonna kind of duplicate our thing here, and we're gonna make it into a ring. So let's duplicate this, let's bring it up there, and we're gonna make it a different color code, so orange. And this one is not gonna be any hard-coded lines in it. So let's refresh, and by default nothing should really change. Let's go ahead and shut off our generated path. So here, why doesn't it exist? Oh yeah, because it's moving along with the offset. So we can type down OFS 0, and that will simply shut it off. So it won't actually be moving and of course we'll need to reduce the radius so we get it back as small as that. And that's pretty cool. And we do have this little of a gap here, but that's not that much of a worry on this, because it's we can make it go just a little further than that, or actually we can multiply this by 2, and it'll make 2 revolutions with it. So it'll kind of fix itself by doing it this way, but that means we'll need twice the amount of segments, or else we'll have this kind of low poly edges going on. So let's get right back here in the segments, and we can just increase that until it does look like smooth and all. And our sphere here, we can increase the size here if we want to also make it smooth and all. 30 I think is more than enough for this to be. So we have quite a simple looping thing here going around, revolving around our ring. Let's repeat that. We're gonna make a nice pattern out of that. So let's get down to our repeat path section here, the first repeater, and we're gonna simply add more, and the position X we're gonna add more, and let's see how his rings are like meeting each other. And on my example I had them all separated, so either gives interesting results visually. Let's start by repeating them with a little offset, and let's open the second repeater, and we're gonna also add more copies, and we're gonna increase the position Y so they are all about the same, with the same gap in between. And we'll need to create a new camera, and let's make it 50mm the default. And what's happening here? All right, I'm gonna create a new null. That's simply gonna be my camera dolly. So let's make it the same color. And I'm simply gonna hit C until I get this panning tool here. I'm gonna get back. I'm gonna zoom out with my camera here. So I have this pattern, and they are all quite at the same place in their offset animation from 1 to 100. So right here in the first repeater here, down here we have the R1 path offset, and this is something that I haven't been messing around with very much up to now. So if we change this, what it'll do is each copy will be offsetted, like for now we're duplicating it from the center and right and left. And are you going to shut down? So it's making kind of an offset to where the ball is in his full revolution, so that will kind of make some kind of a pattern here. Let's run it. Let's try to have it. And since we're not looping, we're gonna set that to loop offset, so they'll always be present. And that will have this kind of an effect on our animation. So that's the first copy. The second copy, the offset is like if it was increased a little bit, and so on for the next one, so on for the next one. So it makes kind of an increase, and it makes kind of a hypnotic pattern with our spheres. Now you see how they're moving. It's kind of interesting. So that's what the repeat offset does, and that's one way that you can use it. But my goal here is to show you with this example, but you can apply that to many other concepts. And here we're gonna offset it on the second path offset. So now as it's repeating this way, it offsets, and as it's repeating the other way, it offsets. And any value here, it's kind of great because we can test different offsets very quickly just by changing the values here. So now I've made it on both, and it's quite interesting what's happening now. And let's get back to our position thing, and let's have those a little closer, like bees and bombs have have them. So let's have them meet together. There. Let's have something like that. So 500 here, and let's try the same here. 500. And we can reduce down the sphere. So was that the ring? So that the ring is reduced, and the sphere, let's reduce it as well. Let's make it not that tiny, but let's make it around that. Kind of a interesting pattern here that we have. It's pretty cool. And let's keep it like that. Let's make a floor, like a pretty simple way that we can add a floor is just by making a we're gonna duplicate that once more. I don't know why it is necessary to grab all three with that, but let's remove this from there, and let's have this also removed, and let's set it to repeat 0 times, because this is the floor, we don't want it to repeat. So this is our base floor. It's like a plain flat circle right in the middle here, and what we need to do is simply increase its radius to the max, and that'll make ourselves a floor on which the ambient occlusion will cast. So it's gonna make it, it's gonna make some way to get some shadows out of that. So let's continue to increase that, and that's how you make a floor. And we'll also probably have to bring it down quite a little bit if we want to. Right now our spheres are kind of halfway into the floor. Let's rotate our camera 90 degrees on the X, so the floor is quite at the center of everything now. We just have to move it down here, and I don't think it quite needs to be connected to those anymore, so we can remove that, and it's in the center now. Let's bring it down a little bit. So right there, it's getting more. Now our spheres are levitating a little bit. So let's find the point where it's quite down on contact here with the floor. Let's color code this brown. This is our floor. So let's rotate back with the dolly, and let's make a nice texture to have even more intricacies in there. I think we're gonna be able to zoom in there. So that's interesting. We make a pattern, and now it's set up, now it's there, and now we can have fun by messing around with the different settings Tao has to offer, and discover nice patterns, nice animations, nice things to do with it, because we have the power to do that. So let's make a texture, and we're gonna make a simple one. So I'm gonna call it texture, and we just need to have it 500 by 500. So let's make new comp like that. We're gonna hit Control-Shift-C to leave all the attributes in there, and we're gonna double click to get inside, and on this we're gonna simply add a ramp, which is a 32-bit effect, and we're gonna add a colorama, which unfortunately is only 16-bit, which it's kind of quite of a bummer, but we're gonna use that. And let's get in the input phase or the output cycle, and we're gonna use a palette, a preset. We're gonna grab the ramp gray, so simply we're gonna have that, and let's make the white. How did I make it in my thing? It was kind of, I leave it like that, and I make two red. I made two red spots here, but here. Let's have one here and have one there, and we're gonna click right where the white is, so we can bring this down over here, and we're gonna click here so we can bring the black here, and we're gonna add one back right here and click right where the black is here, and we're gonna try to bring this. So this is something, can be anything else in that, and we're gonna make it loop because we can easily with Colorama. That's why I grabbed this effect. So with the phase shift here, I'm gonna make a keyframe on the first frame and gonna get to the frame 90 and make one full revolution out of it. So it's gonna simply do like that. So let's get back on here. Let's shut off our texture. Let's get on Tau, and let's get down to the texture, and let's see what our options here. The texture, let's grab it. So first it looks like that. So it's been applied on everything and even on the floor. So I don't think that this is particularly interesting to have it on the floor. I would rather not have it on the floor. So if we don't want a texture to be applied on some geometry created by a specific light, we simply can hard-code it text colon 0, and we're gonna refresh that, and that'll actually tell the texture not to be applied on this light, which is our floor. So we're gonna get it back to a white color, default color we had, and let's get on here and let's change the radius here. I'm gonna have a smaller radius. So that's interesting. We can really easily change the settings that we have here. So let's give ourselves some angle. So right now we're viewing it from the top, but there's nothing. Let's see. Repeat offsets number 2. So let's have a rotation here with first our dolly. So we're gonna rotate it 45 degrees on the Z, and then we're gonna look at it from this angle, and then I'm gonna tap on C until we get the revolving tool for the camera. I'm gonna hold shift and just like click in the center and drag upwards until I get some kind of a perspective like that. So right now I'm moving in. So right now I'm kind of at the end of our floor right here. So now we've got some perspective on that, which is kind of interesting. And of course we can change the angle here. So by default we chose the 50 millimeter. Let's make it 28. So we're gonna have it crash on us, but we're gonna have more perspective in there now. So let's get back and let's zoom back in. So if we want to have more of a perspective effect, or if we want less, let's choose 80 millimeter, and then we cancel the perspective, but we keep the angle. So isometric, orthographic, all these nice scientific camera terms. So let's just choose an angle that looks fine. So that's interesting. And now our texture is it animated. So let's increase the ring a little bit. Oh, that's a sphere. The ring here, let's increase those. So by default, is it going to be animated? Yes, it will. So by default, our texture is applied in this manner around our rings there and our sphere. So since it's all looping, it's gonna make some interesting patterns in here. on our geometry as it loops around, and it's all going to be offset like we did with the repeat offset, and it's gonna loop. So that's pretty much what we're having now. It's somewhat interesting. Let's make it even more interesting. I think we can, as the same way as we offset the path, we can offset the texture. And if we do so, like on Y, I don't think on X, it's not going to change anything on X. So on Y, look at that. Now, it's offsetting the texture animation as well. So this is even more interesting. And if we look at its animation, it's all going to loop. But the texture is going to be offset in the repetition pattern. So that's some interesting way to create nice varying patterns that you don't like. You're discovering them changing the values here. It's not something that I would start off and predict like it will look exactly like that, but I stumble upon the result and I find it's interesting and I keep it. So you can do the same with any concept you're working on. You're not like you can do anything else than rings with a revolving sphere. I'm just doing this because it was a cool idea that I got from Bees and Bombs, and I wanted to experiment on this. And at the same time, it's kind of a great concept to help me explain what I have to explain today. But here is the principle. You can experiment on it. Like I really like to see this used in many different ways. Everything is possible if you think about it. So that's about all I want to show you today. I'm not gonna stop record now, though. I'm gonna just give a few tips on how to make it look better. But if you understand the principle now, you can hop in and try to create your own. But if you just want to have a little more information on how to make it look nicer, let's just stick around with me. So right now I'm trying to find what's the best option for the ambient occlusion, because too much of it kills it and too little, well, we don't see it. So let's shut it entirely off so it's not really obvious, but it makes some kind of a contact shadow with our floor. We just want a little bit more of it, so let's increase the intensity. And now that we do that, it's kind of noisy in there, so let's reduce the scale. We're gonna make this 0.55, so now we can maybe reduce the intensity, and let's try to increase the lift a little bit. So now it's kind of a little better than what it was at first. It gives us a nice shadow, and sometimes it can take a little bit of time to tinker with this and find the appropriate values. So maybe sometimes I'm gonna try to put this down to 16 and it's gonna look better, or for the shadows, especially when we don't have any fog, because fog is sometimes problematic with this, but the super sample, the shadows will look kind of a little bit better with that setting. So right here you can see nice contact shadows here on these parts here. It's very cool. And let's have some reflection, like let's make them a little bit plasticky. So in order to do that, we're gonna get in the material and lighting, and we're gonna simply add the pre-built dark industrial, and by default it's gonna look like that. So we're gonna tone down the reflection down to something around 22, and increase the diffuse strength because that's our light. So let's increase that back, and we're getting this, which is not bad. We can increase the Fresnel if we want to remove a little bit of how the reflection like happens on the areas where the parts are facing the camera. So the reflection will change if you change this value here. We can make it more metal, and that will simply also change the way the kind of a specular hotspot appears in there. So that's also, we can add a custom ambient light. So let's add an ambient light and let's make it totally white. So now everything will be super bright. Now we can go back in here and we're gonna tone down the diffuse trend that we set so high, because now the ambient is also controlling a white light. And this ambient light, we can color it. So if we want to add a general shade of red on here on our lighting, maybe not. Once again, we're experimenting, and let's add ourselves some tau lumi lights to create some nice colored hotspots. So let's get right away down to the material and lighting, and just before we create the light, we're gonna check it on here, and Control Alt Shift L, and let's grab a point, and let's call this one Tau Lumi, and this one, let's make it purple. And let's duplicate it. And this one, let's make it green. So does it cancel itself? Let's bring this to 0 right here. 540 and 540. So it's kind of right at the center. We moved a little bit with the camera, so it's not at the center anymore, but we have this kind of an hotspot, and let's see where our light is. It's quite down at the floor now, so let's move it up a bit. So we kind of have this nice way to add the really cool, and look at how the light reflects on here. It's pretty nice, pretty cool hotspots with Tau Lumis. So let's bring this one over here, and this one is kind of a purpley color, so let's just move it on the axis, the arrows there. I'm not moving the light because I want to make sure that I stay above the floor right here. And these lights, you can of course make it more intense, and you can, like this one, let's make it really intense, and we're gonna reduce its size, so the radius, but it really does all affect in a wider area that I would like. So I would, in these kind of situation, I would get in here and the light fall off here and make it smooth, so our light are reduced to an area that we decide here. So this radius, we're gonna make it even smaller than that, and we're gonna make it more distant. So hotspots, various size, various glowing visual aspect that you can of course add in there, and then mess around. And oh, it's the green thing that I'm moving now. Let's get to the first slide, and I would like it to be closer to the floor, so our area is more confined here, and it's right around there. It's pretty obvious now, but let's make it more towards the blue, kind of a purple. And does it change anything? Yeah, but I like it this way. And let's grab another of this green light. All right, so let's move this around in here and back there. And now I'm just kind of fooling around. Everything you do up to here is pretty much of your, according to your taste. I'm gonna simply add a, am I still in 8-bit? This is all in 8-bit color as well. Let's get to 32 bits, because now we're gonna add an adjustment. So Control Alt Y, we're gonna add an adjustment layer, and oh, it's getting hard on you, isn't it? And let's add a levels on there, right here. So first round of color correction, and here we're gonna go in each of the channels separately, and we're gonna look at those where we have an empty space. So I'm gonna bring this over here to get more richness in our green here. And if we mess around with this, like, it helps us have a nice general light shade. So if we want more blue, here is where we can control it. And let's get in the RGB. So this graph is pretty, we don't need that much of a correction on it. Let's add a curves, and we can increase the contrast here. So that's also gonna help us with bringing back the shadow without making the actual shadow values that high, which will, well, make it more apparent without making it that noisy. So that can help also. And let's add another adjustment layer on top of that, and we're simply gonna make some kind of vignette, but this kind of vignette, we're gonna do it with a curve. So we're gonna simply tone everything down with this. We're gonna bring this there, and we're gonna kind of make everything dark, but all the lit areas are still gonna have some color in there. And we're gonna go to the ellipse tool while we have this adjustment layer selected, and we're gonna double click on it. Gonna invert that, quickly twice tap on M, make a little bit of a feather, and then we can mess around with that. So I don't know that we necessarily need badly some feather, but usually we can fake some light direction. So if there was like some actual lights getting from this direction in this case, and let's reduce the opacity of the whole layer, and I don't think that helps it pretty much, doesn't it? It doesn't help it pretty much. Just a little bit on the corners, just to suggest that there is some actual differences in the tonalities of the light that is projected in the room that this would actually exist in. But right, I think that we are pretty much done right here. So let's see if this loops. We're gonna make a marker here on frame 0. Let's go to frame 90, and we're gonna make a marker here. So it did crash. So I got the project open back from just before we made the vignette, and I think we're just not gonna do it this time. We're not gonna do the vignette, guys. It's not that it was that great. Anyway, let's add some fake depth of field quickly. So I have a tutorial to show you how to intricately make it according to your Tao geometry, but let's make this one according to a simple blur map that we're gonna create. So this, we're gonna make it 180 by 180, and it's gonna be called blur map, and we're simply gonna make this, we're gonna Control Shift C, and let's get right in here, and we're gonna right click on the blur map layer, and actually we're gonna come to the layer styles here, and we're gonna add a gradient overlay. And right here in the gradient overlay, we're gonna click here, and we're gonna bring the black right in the middle. So we can type down 50 here to have it right in the middle, and we're gonna add another one here and make it white. And also we're gonna, from this knot in the center here, we're gonna grab these little pieces here and stretch them closer to the white parts. So everywhere that it's black, it's gonna be super crisp, and everywhere that it's white, it's gonna be blurry. So we can even like make this black area a little bit wider, so we're pretty sure that right in the middle here everything is and perhaps we can lower it down a little bit. So this will be our focus point, and we can actually rotate this like that because it has some kind of an angle, and we can just try to match it. It doesn't need to be entirely perfect. So this, I think, should look great as a blur map. Let's shut it off, and let's Control Alt Y, a new adjustment layer. We're gonna add a camera lens blur on here, and we're gonna make sure that this is checked, and we're gonna select the blur map that we've just made here. So right as you can see here, right as we get towards the corner, it gets blurry, and right where we get towards the distance here, it gets blurry, and right at the middle here, it gets crisp. So that's exactly what we want, and we can increase this here drastically by increasing this value here. But let's be subtle. Let's not go too strong with this. And we're simply gonna recreate our vignette, and let's make it a different way this time. I'm gonna make some kind of a dark red solid on which we're gonna apply an ellipse tool, and we're gonna invert that. We're gonna quickly twice tap on M. I'm gonna add some feather to that, and we're gonna hit F4 so we can go in there in the modes, and we're gonna set that to color burn. And we're gonna tone it down, so that'll make some kind of a work in vignette. And let's not have it entirely round, because totally spherical shapes are unnatural. So something like that should make it look quite interesting. Oh, and you see if I bring this down here, it kind of lights up the kind of makes it glow on the blurs. And if we can we do that? Control Alt Y. On top of all this, we're gonna add a glow effect just to see what we can do with that if it has its place. So by default, meh, very bright. We want to tone this up, and we're gonna tone this down. And for this, we have to be in 32 bits. And we can somewhat control the amount of glows that we have here. So maybe if we add some kind of wiggle to that with these settings, it's gonna make, let's do it. I'm gonna go to the internet right here, Dan Ebbert, looping wiggle, get over here, copy, and was it the threshold? Yeah, the threshold. It's at 70.2. We're gonna alt click on glow threshold. We're gonna paste that, and our loop time is 3 seconds, and the amplitude, let's make it 33, and let's check that out. So it's gonna be a little bit hard to process right now, but this is kind of gonna make it. Let's have this even more drastic than that. So all right, I'm gonna stop it right there. So can't wait to see what you'll be creating with this concept. And remember, there's not a single way that this can be used. There are several hundreds, thousands, millions of many ways that you can think of combining these tips that I just gave you to make something of your own that is completely incredible, and I would like to see it. So post it if you make something. Hit me up. I'd like to see it. I'm curious about what others are creating. And thank you very much for watching. As always, see you next time.